please bring a warm welcome to our next speaker, who is our very own Gillian Mays, content creator at Storyblok. Gillian is the person, who recently polled and explored 1,600 respondents from 7 countries in how organizations use the content management systems. Hey, Gillian.
How are you?
Good. Excited to get started. Going good.
Great.
Okay, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for the introduction once again, guys. Like they said, my name is Gillian Mays, and I'm a content creator here at Storyblok. Part of my job is to conduct research and write reports relating to CMSs and how they're being used. So for this edition of Stories from the Block, I wanted to talk about one of our recent bigger projects, the State of CMS for 2023. Through this study, we discovered a lot of important info about how CMS users think and behave in 2023, and we're hoping it provides a unique window into current and future trends. So in this talk, I will be covering why we conducted the study in the first place, a few key findings from it, and what they could all mean for the future of CMS. So let's go ahead and start with the why. Why did we do this in the first place? What were we trying to learn? Changes in the CMS industry are really important to keep up with. Knowing what's going on helps you avoid common problems that maybe other people are running into. It helps you stay ahead of the curve on trends and such. And in general, the better you understand the area you're working in, the better of a user experience you can provide. But the challenge comes in the keeping up with part. The industry changes all the time. It's the nature of the beast. You've got new features coming out all the time, new technologies, new programs, and then user demands for what they want to see in their CMS are also developing over time. So we wanted to provide an accurate, updated resource that could reflect the current industry. This meant we needed to learn how users around the world leverage their CMSs, meaning what they liked, what challenges they ran into, and what their plans for the future are. Our methodology for this included polling over 1,600 respondents from across 7 countries. We gathered that data, analyzed it, compiled those results, and then drew conclusions from them. Now, before I get started in earnest, I want to let you know that what you're about to watch is just a taste of what we have found with this study. If you want to get the full report, you can download the free report for the full results or attend a webinar with myself and VP of Marketing Thomas Mayhem happening on May 3rd. You can scan the QR code right there. Now, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to 3 key findings from the State of CMS 2023. We're going to start with a very basic one to get us started. What type of CMS are respondents using? This is important because it is the very core of your system. It affects all other aspects of how you're using it. It impacts the rest of your content. The options here, as you can see, were monolithic, headless, or other. Other includes page builders, web apps, custom CMSs, anything that doesn't neatly fall into the headless or monolithic category. As you can see from the results up here, 48% of people were using monolithic CMS, 16% were using other, and 36% were using headless. For technology that is still relatively new, it is a pretty impressive statistic to be sitting at 36% of the entire sample using headless. This is also if you compare it to 2022's results. Compared to 2022, 1% more people are using headless and 2% less are using monolithic. This shows that more people are using headless and less people are using monolithic, of course. And even if you want to consider that those small percentage differences from 2022 aren't too significant, at very least, we're still in a holding pattern of people maintaining their interest in headless, which is a positive sign. Okay, and with that, let's go ahead and move on to our second point and our next slide. How many people are using multiple CMSs and why? So we touched on this a little bit in the last speakers, but the use of multiple CMSs isn't uncommon, and unfortunately, it does bring some problems. If your platforms aren't connected, you end up with content siloing. Your data is going to be isolated to individual platforms. It can't easily be shared. You can't do as much with it as you might want to. You're left without any kind of centralized management, and it leads to unnecessarily complicated admin on the back end for everyone involved. Basically, with multiple CMSs, you're trying to take separate, distinct moving parts and make them operate as one without that connective tissue that would really make that make sense. This leads to inconsistent content delivery across channels and inefficiency behind the scenes. Despite this, as you can see from this graph, a really surprising 57% of the samples still said they used 2 or more CMSs. So that made us wonder, with all those downsides that come attached to it, what could possibly be the motivator? So we asked what the top 3 reasons were, and spoiler alert, they all tie into monolithic usage. So let's take a look at the next slide. The most commonly cited reason up there was to minimize delivery risk. This could be the result of having backups or trying to reach multiple front ends with multiple systems. Basically, people are wanting assurance of data that multiple single CMSs aren't really able to provide. The second most common answer up there was the need for a new technology stack. Monolithic systems are okay for some things. If you have a very simple, straightforward setup, that might be all you need. But one thing they are not built to do is adapt. The all-in-one setup makes things only really operate if you don't need that much customization or changing. If you do need to add new technology or programs to a monolithic system, the rigid structure means that doing so is going to be a difficult process. It's probably going to be expensive, and thanks to the fact that it's an all-in-one setup, it could pose a risk to the rest of your technology ecosystem, because an error in one area can bring down the whole system. And that's obviously less than ideal. So instead of dealing with taking one monolithic CMS and modifying it so that it can do what that new technology stack needs it to do, it seems that some users are just adding on an auxiliary CMS. Rather than get involved with modifying an old one, they're just adding on a separate new one. Try and bypass that roadblock a little bit. And then our third most common reason up there was omnichannel capabilities. Omnichannel is simply essential to modern marketing these days. People expect it from brands. They want to be able to access your organization whenever, wherever, however they want. If you're not providing that, you are missing out on a lot of opportunities. But unfortunately, if you're using a monolithic system, the back end is so tightly tied to the front end that it's very similarly to adding a new technology stack. It is extremely difficult to add a new omni-channel onto a monolithic system. So instead, similar to the last point, people will just add another CMS on to make better use of it instead. Now, what all 3 of these have in common is that they're basically workarounds. They're jerry-rigging. They're just ways to compensate for an inflexible, unadaptable monolithic system. And clearly there's a lot of people using it already, but while this might work in the short run, it's really just a Band-Aid. It's not going to fix the underlying problem. And as you add more CMSs, the disorganization is only going to grow. So you have consequences that are compounding with a problem that isn't getting solved. It is worth noting here that all 3 of these issues can be bypassed if you're using a single headless CMS. So this itself could be an indicator that headless usage will be increasing in the future as people kind of realize this. And for our last section, let's go to the last slide. And we're going to see what platforms and channels are currently being served. We wanted to know where CMS users are currently reaching their audiences and how they plan to in the future. This is another element that relies very heavily on the type of CMS being used. Obviously, the more channels that you're intending to reach, the more essential it is to have a CMS that can access all of those easily and effectively. The top 3 results you see here are not surprising. You've got websites, mobile applications, and e-commerce platforms / storefronts in that order. This is not a surprise to anyone, I'm pretty sure. These are very common among users. It doesn't tell us a lot that we don't already know. The more interesting bit is with the rest of the results, the Internet of Things options. These are in less numbers than the top 3, but they're still very clearly present in the sample. Their popularity ranking was in this order: in-store digital screens, voice-activated speakers like Alexa, AR and VR, and smartwatches. This snapshot is interesting because it helps reflect some current omnichannel efforts in part right now. These are the omnichannel Internet of Things options that people are accessing currently. there is a definite interest shown in expanding to those less traditional channels, something that goes beyond the website and goes more into technology that is still newer to some people. And then we also took this question and we applied it to future plans, which you can see in the next slide here. And I want to once again focus on the Internet of Things options here. Interestingly, more people were planning on using in-store digital screens and smartwatches than currently do. So these are two channels that I definitely recommend keeping an eye on for 2023. We might see some increase as people start to make concrete actions on these interests. In the same vein, you might want to also be paying attention to CMSs that can best support omnichannel, because as interest in omnichannel continues to grow and appreciation for it continues to grow, people are going to be more interested in actually taking advantage of the benefits that it has to offer. Okay, and with that, I can go ahead and wrap things up on my end. The parts of the study that we've covered today suggest a really bright future for headless. It solves the need for multiple CMSs. It helps users serve increasingly popular platforms, and more users are choosing it than ever before. But once again, we have only just scratched the surface here. There's a lot more to learn. If you want to learn more, you can attend our dedicated webinar where myself and Storyblok VP of Marketing Thomas Pahen will be diving into the research details to fully understand the state of CMS in 2023. And the link is right there once again. That is it for my part of Stories from the Block. Thanks for your time, everyone. Back to you, Crystal and Maria.
Thank you, Gillian. What a great insight into how organizations worldwide use their content management system. It's really an all-in-one study that I can only recommend, and it shows that headless is the future. And it's already here, so thank you so much, Gillian. It was amazing to have you.
Of course, thanks.